What is darkness? We hear this a lot in the magical communities and the Christian communities as well. Things like forces of darkness, powers of darkness, working with the darkness, darkness versus light. And some people embrace it, some people fear it. So let me give you my take. Welcome to my channel. You are entering the world of magic and mysticism with your host, Lee W. Johnson. Keep the lights on and help improve the channel by becoming a supporter for just $2.99 per month. Hit the join button. Okay, so the idea of forces of darkness, first of all, is purely a Christian ideology. You do get some people in the magical communities who use these phrases, forces of darkness, powers of darkness. And usually it's either to describe the people, the forces that the people in the left-hand path use, by those people who are more on the light side of things. Or it's sometimes used by left-hand pathers themselves, and it's usually used in a manner in which brings about this edgelordy, oogie-boogie type of imagery and things like that. But the problem here is we then face the idea of light versus dark. The problem is actually quite simple. It really doesn't matter, the whole light versus dark thing. What you want to try and get to is a place where you have brought the light and the dark into balance or equilibrium or harmony, and then start moving forward with that. But you know, we have to kind of bring ourselves into that union and remove the idea of being separate. And it's all about, you know, the whole Christian ideal is separation. Separation from the physical in order to become more godly, but all of it is one big body. You know, I think it should all be embraced. Everything should be embraced. But you know, even in the magical communities, people are on the extreme light side or the extreme dark side, and occasionally you find people in the middle who are trying to find that balance, and some people who have found that balance, and occasionally it goes a bit wonky and we move left and right, and you know, but ultimately what we're trying to do is get that balance of between the light and dark. But in order to get that, you need to understand both sides first, experience both sides, and then once you know what they are, then you can start bringing them into a union. But now, as I said, this idea of dark forces does come from Christian ideology, and in this regard, it really is referring to anyone or anything which does not fit into that Christian paradigm. And that includes pagans, heathens, magic users, even people, in a lot of cases, people who do Reiki healing, that Reiki energy is considered to be from the devil. So what do we, as magic users, actually consider to be dark? Now, this is obviously going to depend on your own path and your own views. Somebody who is on a neo-pagan or neo-Wiccan path would probably consider a lot of traditional witches to be dark. And this is often, well, for a few reasons, but I think one of them would probably be that instead of the Lord and Lady in the neo-pagan, neo-Wiccan tradition, which is often considered to be very light, we may come across terms like the devil and the blood mother, and just the terms themselves would kind of send a lot of neo-Wiccans into a bit of a frenzy. And even to the point where some of them will probably start praying for the lost souls of the traditional witch who is lost in the the soil and the earth, and amongst their stang and their skull and crossbones and things like that. But I suppose this brings more imagery to mind of Christians praying for the lost souls of those who are going to go to hell. But what can we do? But when it does come to the magical community, the idea of forces of darkness usually refer to practitioners of the left-hand path. And this can often be viewed in two different ways. Now, one of these ways is within the left-hand path. We find that many of the practices come from the ancient Middle East, Sumeria, Babylon, Persia, etc., etc., etc. And these lands are, I'm talking from a Western point of view, but these lands are often considered to be dark. The people of it are dark-skinned. This becomes somewhat racist. We feel that we have to go to these dark places, lands, people, and things like that in order to find this powerful magic. And there is a lot of power. I mean, a lot of people consider the origins of magic, magical practices and such things to come from these areas. But it doesn't really necessarily mean they're more powerful. But there seems to be this drive and attraction for Western people to go to these particular practices in these old, ancient, dark lands because it is dark. It's considered to be dark. So if you think about it, if you really examine it, then it's not so much about the practices themselves and the magic that they can bring. It's more about the fact that we see it in movies and things where we have these the voodoo practitioners and such from Africa and from Arabia and all of these, as I said, dark lands with dark people and dark skinned people that brings to mind this powerful magic because it's earthy, it's often violent actually, but its movement, its power, its passion, its lust and things like that, and a lot of people are attracted to that. But if you really examine it, it's often a case of it being a dark-skinned practice, and people of the West seem to be attracted to that. And the other viewpoint we could probably consider is that a lot of people coming to the left-hand path find this power in the edginess of it, and this is often a reaction of coming from a Christian background and sort of going from that one extreme to the other extreme. And unfortunately, they bring that left versus right and that dark versus light aspect into, and good versus evil aspect into their own magical practice, which is something they're trying to get away from. Unfortunately, it's just exactly the same thing, just in a different context. And some people find their way out of this, other people don't. It becomes their complete identity. And they refer to the forces of darkness and the infernal armies of hell and all of these Christian ideologies, which shouldn't have a place in their practice, but it does. And that's just who they are, I guess. But it's a lot of people get to that point. As I said, it becomes their identity, and that's what they stick with, unfortunately. And again, that Christian ideology comes into a different extreme in the magical communities. Somebody who may have come from a Christian background still has that light, good, whatever we want to term it, aspect within themselves. So they don't go from the one extreme to the other extreme. They just open themselves up to something slightly different. but it's really not much of a change. So the Christian ideology still comes through, and they are of the light, and people like demonolators, Satanists, etc., etc., are of the darkness, and therefore they are evil. They are evil practitioners. They are calling these forces of darkness and things like that. So even in the magical communities, we have that ideology of good versus evil and light versus dark. But as I said, it really needs to be a case of knowing the two and bringing them into a union, a harmony, and a balance, an equilibrium, and then taking that forward. But unfortunately, a lot of people don't. So what is this darkness? Now that we've had a look at all that, what is this darkness actually? The darkness is the place where wisdom is found. If we were to consider wisdom to be light, then the light is found in the darkness, and the light shines brightest in the darkness. But you can't have one without the other. Now, I actually wrote my blog post before doing the video, which I'm doing lately, just to get my thoughts together and things like that. And the rest of it actually kind of flowed out pretty well. So what I want to do is rather read that than try to remember what I wrote and put it into words, because the words were just there. So I'm going to read this to you. There is the saying, knowledge is power, but knowledge only becomes powerful when it is understood and becomes wisdom. Here we can look at 3 of the Sephirah in the upper part of the Kabbalistic tree, Da'at, Binah, and Chokhmah, or knowledge, understanding, and wisdom. Da'at is the abyss, and as we know, an abyss is darkness, a bottomless chasm. We have to move through this darkness in order to gain the knowledge. We then have to move into understanding in order to assimilate that knowledge. And once that has been done, we can move into wisdom. The union of this is the crown, the light, Keter. So what do I think this darkness actually is? It is the abyss. This abyss is feared by many because it is unknown. Because it is feared, it is all things which are feared. It is the shadow side of our nature. It is the beast that lurks beneath the surface that we are told we must cage and never let out. It is the passion and lust that we feel that we are instructed to keep under wraps in order to be accepted. It is all things that we have been told are not allowed for one reason or another, usually because it is not proper or it is taboo. Power alone can be found in these places, simply by breaking them open, and when we dare to venture into the abyss, we will find that comfort and warmth which has been kept from us as we float unhindered in the nothing which is everything. The so-called forces of darkness are those powers and forces, entities, energies and spirits that are waiting for us to discover the extent of our true selves, the entirety of our being. We cannot be whole until we unite the light and dark within us and bring them into harmony. Until then, we remain divided, separated, disconnected from that which we are. Darkness is the spaces between the particles, the nothingness and void that is found between the atomic particles and subparticles. Nothing can exist without the no-thing, and so darkness is the everything. Now, of course, if we are going to talk about dark entities within such a framework as demonolatry, what we will be talking about there would be things like astral parasites, those lower energy forms and entities which are out to harm us. And the reason they want to harm us and cause fear and anxiety and such things is because that's what they feed on. That's how they survive. So in regards to anything which is a dark entity, that would be what we're talking about, those astral parasites, those beings which feed on fear, which feed on the anxiety, and therefore they try to create it in order to create more food for themselves. So, you know, the thing is, I wouldn't even consider dark entity or darkness or anything related to dark to be negative or evil or it just is. It's the same as light. The light is there, the dark is there, they have to exist together. Otherwise, life doesn't happen. I remember something I read a long time ago. It was referring to the universe as being like a battery with a negative and a positive charge. In order for the light to shine, you have to connect both poles. You can't have a negative without a positive, or you can't make it work with just connecting the negative or just connecting the positive. You have to connect the negative and the positive in order for the light to shine. So you have to have these negative and positive aspects, and they have to be used together, and they have to be with each other. They cannot be separated. If you start separating them, you create an imbalance, and eventually you're going to recognize that and feel that, and you'll probably fight against it. But eventually, at some point, whether it's this lifetime or the next lifetime, you're going to have to give in, and you're going to have to understand that they have to work together. There's just no way around it. It's just the way the life is and the cosmos. So anyway, yeah, me stop there. Alright, so that is my take on this whole concept of darkness. Alright, and I'll see you on Wednesday for Ask Lee, and have a good time until then. Cheers for now. Bye bye.